All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardi Rice, and my correspondent,
Moncherie.
All right, so as y'all know, we love to have great guests with us as we engage in interesting conversations about things that are really going on in current events or going on in the climate that we sit in now. So today we have two immigration lawyers with us who will be helping us dissect this whole immigration situation. I'll say situation. Last year, we had a lot of conversations about immigration because it was brought to the forefront when the world saw immigrant kids in cages. And it sparked this whole conversation that is still a conversation. We just haven't prioritized it because of everything else that's going on in the world. But it's still a situation, and it's still going on. So I thought, you know how I am, so I figured it'd be best to go get some experts to come in and really give us a greater insight as to what is really going on in the world of immigration. So I'm going to give each one of them space to introduce themselves and tell you about their background, starting with Miss Elizabeth. So tell everybody about you, what you do, and a little bit about your background.
Hey, it's great to be here with you guys. My name's Elizabeth Garvish. I am the founder and managing member of Garvish Immigration Law Group. We are a boutique business and family immigration law firm located here in Atlanta, Georgia. We also do, so our clients would be companies. We also represent physicians and hospitals, medical practices, and that's our specialty niche. So I do a little bit different than Amna, who's our other guest. I'm on the side where we are advocating for benefits, not defending from deportation.
Okay. All right, Miss Amna, tell everybody about yourself and about your practice and what you do.
Hi, I'm Amna Shirazi. Thank you for having me today. As Elizabeth was mentioning, my area of practice is primarily defending people from removal proceedings in the United States. I deal with complex family-based cases, some immigration, which is the overlapping of criminal law and immigration law, and defending immigrants from consequences related to any criminal activity that they may have been accused of doing. I also do asylum and refugee law, as well as Violence Against Women Act cases, ICE detainers, and generally I work with the immigration courts, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, CBP, and the U.S. consulates around the world.
Okay, that's going to be a lot to unpack. It sounds like there's a lot going on in your particular world. All right, so as you can see, we have two distinctly different lawyers in the same field who do different things. So I guess we should start at the basics. So when we talk about immigration, I'll start with you. So when we talk about immigration, tell us a little bit about what immigration should mean. Like, we hear that word, a lot of people hear that word, and it's like, what does immigration really mean? Like, let's start there. So explain to me a little bit about what immigration means.
Well, I mean, immigration is our heritage as Americans. My grandfather came over from Ellis Island, from Hungary through Ellis Island. I know Amna's parents came from Pakistan. You know, unless you're an American Indian native to this country, you have immigrated here. So that is our heritage. That is how America has become this great nation that we are. We are a world leader because the best and the brightest come to America. And that is why we have core values as a law firm. One of them is passion for America. That is why I do what I do. I want a diverse nation. I want to see other cultures and other languages. I am very into personal development. I'm very into mindset and this abundant way of thinking, and there is enough for everyone. And the last 4 years, the presidential, the administration has been, basically working towards a policy of getting every immigrant out of this country. They are, that is, the base that Trump kind of panders to, they hear the word immigration, they're coming to get us. They're going to take your jobs. They're going to take everything. There's never any talk about what immigrants offer to this country, what immigrants do for this country. So that's the big media noise out there. That's what we hear all the time. Bans, bars, let's keep them out. Dehumanizing immigrants by calling them aliens. There was, I guess a couple of years ago, even the Foreign Affairs Manual, which is the guide for the Department of State, they went through and changed instead of foreign employee or foreign worker, they changed it to alien, which dehumanizes that. It means these little things, and that's kind of what we've been seeing during the last, 3.5 years, is just this slow, like, let's just, deny as much as we can. Let's push it as far as we can. I can get into that whole, if you want me to. That was one of the topics I thought we could talk about, is just this gradual, let's try to just kill your spirit so you won't want to come here. So you're an employer who won't want to hire somebody. So it's going to take you so long. It's going to cost so much money. It's going to be such a hassle. We're just going to deny it because we don't like your name. So you don't want it, so you can't immigrate. So here's what's going on right now. And I don't want to take all the spotlight, but just in a nutshell, if I name a few things of what has happened over the last 4 years-ish, since Trump came into office. So I can look back, 6-7 years ago, I was very involved in our local liaison with the U.S. Immigration Service here. And I was involved with our bar association. We would have meetings and liaison. It was like kumbaya. We would connect, coordinate, get cases. We would resolve cases together. We had a mailbox we could mail to help us resolve some cases that maybe got stuck. We would be pleasant to each other. It was like we would meet in person, bring breakfast every quarter. I mean, it was great. And that was at every level of liaison through our bar association, American Immigration Lawyers Association. So they would do the service centers, which do a lot of adjudications. There's 4 service centers nationally. We would have a committee and we would go and tour the facility. We would have a contact there that could help us get things unstuck through all the service centers. Department of Labor, same thing. We'd have this liaison that we could really, through the government. So that was wonderful. That shut down, gone. We won't talk to you anymore. Call this 800 nonsense number. That doesn't do anything. So that's one of the things that's happened. So that's making it harder on immigrants. It's making it harder on lawyers to get benefits. The next thing that's happened is they decided, generally, you would understand that you would need an interview for a marriage-based green card because there can be some fraud there. We want to see the relationship of the people together, the couple. So that's fine. So we have to do an interview at the end of that process. I do a lot of employment-based, so it's pretty clear. Do you make enough? I mean, do you meet the minimum requirements? Like, do you have the diploma? Do you have the education, the experience? Do you have? Can the company pay your salary based on their financials? It's cut and dried, And then there's background checks that they perform that they don't have to see someone in person. So the last 20 years or forever, we haven't really had to have interviews in person if it's an employment-based case. So that would be like one of my physicians, the hospital petitions for them to work permanently at the hospital. And so generally the service center would have said, okay, we're going to approve each step of this petition. When it comes to the final green card, we do a background check, we do your medical, we look at everything, approved. No need to have an in-person interview at the local office. So that's the next thing they did. Okay, we're going to require in-person interviews for all employment-based cases. So that's like, and these, that's like, are you kidding? We've done this like for decades without having to do an interview. There might be an interview, let's say if there was a criminal issue, some kind of out of the ordinary circumstance. So that would probably be like 1% of the time. So now we're having to, represent our clients at the interview, prepare them. This has delayed things immensely. And I have clients all over the world and all over the nation. So for me to coordinate with my client in Iowa or my client in wherever it is, it's very difficult. So we were like getting co-counsel and things like that to attend the interviews. But and the other thing is the adjudicators at the local offices, they're not really up to speed on employment-based things, and they're not supposed to even be looking at the employment-based, petition anyway. But so that's another thing. Let's delay this, bring this out, like draw everything out. We had another. This is more recent, but they made a big change to the public charge policy. So now, instead of, and I'm not going to go on and on and on. I'm just telling you.
Sure. But if you mentioned public charge, will you just back up a little bit and high level explain what that means for folks who may not be aware?
So here's public charge. Okay, so here's how it's been in the regulations. This is how it is. If you might become a public charge, that means you are more likely than not to go onto means-tested public benefits. When you immigrate, then you can be found inadmissible to the United States. Okay, so if you're gonna go into welfare, you're gonna Medicaid, depending, there's some things that are, but it's whatever's defined as a means-tested public benefit. What has been the procedure and the regulations like in the past is there's a form, it's called an Affidavit of Support, and it puts more of the, the onus is on the petitioner or a co-sponsor or joint sponsor to basically affirm that they will support this alien and they will, vouch for them that they will not become a public charge because they're making a certain level of income and they can support them if they do. And that lasts until they become a citizen or until they work so many quarter hours in the US. So that was only required in family-based cases. You get your affidavit of support. There's a level of income. It's a different level of income. It's 125% of the poverty level based on household size. So that was it. So that would be like, okay, if you've overcome public charge, it's a numbers game. It's math. No big deal. Now, what has happened, and this was challenged in the Supreme Court as well, but we lost, and it was implemented as of February 28th. There is now like I don't know how many points that you look into, a totality of the circumstances test. So they're going to look at everything, and they switched everything to the foreign, the alien, what they call, but the foreign national. And so they will look at age, health, education, English proficiency, household size, see what else. It's a list of factors that they kind of look at the totality of circumstances. They require an affidavit of self-sufficiency with every adjustment application now. This is an 18-page form. They want to have tax transcripts, credit score, all your education levels, like just a crazy amount of documentation. And this is required for family-based cases, employment-based cases, family members of employment-based cases. So if I have, a company that's petitioning someone and they are, you've got this executive that's coming in with a wife and 2 children, well, he must file the affidavit of self-sufficiency, 18 pages. She, as the spouse, must file. The 2-year-old and the 7-year-old must file. So that's like, okay, 70 pages, whatever, of 60 to 70 pages of documentation of forms we have to fill out for each. And this guy's coming in to be paid 6 figures. So it's crazy. So that's another thing where it's costing people more. It's costing companies more. So this list, I've just gone over a few things, but there's I could go on and on and on and on about this chilling effect. I mean, I'll list a couple more just that are recent. They're going to furlough 70%.
Hold on. Let me shift because I know you're very passionate about it.
I'm going to expand upon what we were talking about, but then I do want to we can come back to public charge and also talk a little bit about crimmigration as well, because I think that's probably the only thing we've even come close to touching in the last several months. So
let me ask Amna a question. So let's get into what it actually takes to become a legal immigrant in the United States. What is that process? What does it look like? Let me ask Amna that, because I think you spend more time in court and things of that magnitude. So what does that process look like? What is that process?
Well, there are a few ways, but one is through employment, as Elizabeth was describing, but you can also come through a family member, an immediate family member, which is a child under 21, a spouse of a U.S. citizen, a parent of a U.S. citizen that's over 21, and then obviously there's the employment-based side as well, where employers can sponsor workers. There's investment-based immigration. Then we also have an area of the law where if people are fleeing persecution in their own countries and they're able to get to the United States as a safe harbor, they're able to present themselves and ask for asylum in the United States. They have to establish past persecution, and that they have a reasonable fear of future persecution if they're returned to their home countries. And there's an entire process for that as well. You can file for that affirmatively, meaning that when you arrive at a point of entry, whether it's an airport, the Canadian border, the Mexican border, you can turn yourself in at that point and say, you know, I just arrived and I need help. And at that point, an asylum officer will do what's called a credible fear interview and take an assessment of what your claim is. There is also defensive asylum, in which you ask for asylum protective measures in front of an immigration judge. So if you're placed in removal proceedings upon entry or at any other time, you can request safe harbor in front of an immigration judge. There are also several other programs that are available to get immigration. And by immigration, what I mean is lawful permanent resident status that leads to being able to become a U.S. citizen. Not all migrants are coming here to be permanent residents. So aside from asylum, there are a couple of other programs that are available to you in a defensive situation in front of an immigration judge when the government decides that they want to exercise their authority to attempt to remove you from the United States. You can bring forth defenses to that. And when you go to immigration court, your opposing counsel is the Department of Justice. It is an administrative court, but there's a judge, a DOJ attorney, and then the defense attorney. God help those that don't have an attorney. Some do attempt to go pro se. There is no public defender in immigration court, so anyone who does move forward in immigration court does, for the most part, have to pay for representation unless they can get a nonprofit to assist them. And as you can imagine, their resources are very thin. But so there's employment, family, asylum, and then asking for relief in front of an immigration judge if and when you're placed in removal proceedings. And there are various programs that lead to green cards in that way.
So you were saying that in immigration court, there's no public defenders.
That is correct.
So is that how we got to the when the kids in cages thing started and we saw all these kids just kind of there without representation? Is that how we got there? Because there's no public defenders in immigration court.
You know, I've been doing this 20 years, and I would say that they have attempted to remove little kids from the United States for 20 years. I mean, I remember first starting out, and I had a little child that was 3 years old that was in removal proceedings, and I remember sitting next to a 3-year-old child in front of an immigration judge, and the parents had hired me to defend that child, and I just remember being hit by the fact that the government is actually trying to remove this child in a court proceeding from their guardians in the United States. So this is nothing new where they attempt to remove children from the United States. What is new was the family separation policy that started under the Trump administration, where in order to prevent people from trying to come to the United States, they said, we're going to separate kids from whoever they're traveling with. And the reason as someone who's been doing this, is because children are given separate proceedings that allow for longer processing times to assess their claims. So it is sort of at least my opinion, that sort of became public knowledge. And in the government's opinion, people were coming to the border with children for the sole purpose of presenting themselves, knowing full well that the children allow them to go through a slower process to have their cases reviewed. So I think that's really what started that policy, to discourage people from presenting themselves at the border with kids. The argument is that most of these people were not coming with their kids, which is just not true. But the family separation policy started under Trump, where if parents came to the United States with kids, in order to prevent that from happening or prevent future immigration, they were snatching kids away from whoever they were traveling with. And in most cases, it was, in fact, their parents. We have stories of women who are breastfeeding and their baby ripped away from them. We have stories where a husband and wife are separated. I apologize for that. I have a text coming in, but there are stories where people have killed themselves just from depression and anxiety in custody, being torn away from their families. And to your point about children, a lot of these kids have been lost in the system. So there has been litigation that has ordered ICE and the different federal agencies that were supposed to care for these kids to reunite them with their families and guardians. And frankly, they can't find a lot of these kids. And we don't know what happened to these children, whether they've been victimized in human trafficking. We just don't know. And they blame, non-cooperation between agencies, database defects. I mean, they're coming up with all kinds of reasons, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of kids that we cannot find right now. And
could I ask you to that point about the entry-related offenses? Like we've, I think, understood at a very high level that there's been a difference in the crackdown of, or really in the criminalization and the further criminalization and penalties that come with unlawful entry. And I don't have a great understanding of that, and I'd love to know how that's changed and what some of the collateral consequences are. I think we all know that, or at least from what we understand, even the process of seeking asylum is I guess that's broken down. There's too much of a backlog for any of the rights that we believe people are supposed to be afforded to actually come to fruition. But what are some of the charges that people are facing, and how does that process work? Or was that the same under previous administrations? What would you say about that?
Well, so immigration is not criminal. So you don't get charged with a crime for entering the United States without documentation or a visa. So the only crime that there is for immigration is under federal law for recidivism, meaning that you've re-entered multiple times, and the U.S. Attorney's Office decides that they want to actually criminally prosecute you in federal court for recidivism. And they typically do that for people who've been in federal prison, who have been removed from the United States and then re-enter and then are caught again, and then they prosecute them for that crime. But in general, just crossing the border without documentation is not a crime. And I think that's what a lot of people who are anti-immigrant, they have a problem with that. They think it should be a crime. In fact, is more of a civil issue than a criminal one. And as far as asylum, yes, the new asylum laws make it much more difficult to apply for asylum. There is this new rule and policy that the Trump administration has put in place where you have to wait outside the United States for your opportunity to apply. And then, just further and further, as Elizabeth was mentioning earlier, what we see is obstruction. There's always this sort of idea that the Trump administration and people who do follow Trump, they say, well, as long as somebody is coming legally, we're not against it. And as Elizabeth was talking, there are people coming legally and financially solvent and able, to be productive in the workforce here. In fact, we need those people and our government is preventing those people from coming here. They're keeping families apart from each other based on what Elizabeth was talking about with respect to the public charge rule, which is disproportionately affecting poor people and those who are elderly and those that have health issues. So the whole idea that the Trump administration is okay with legal immigration, to me, doesn't wash, because we are consistently seeing obstruction in the hopes that people run out of money, resources, energy, the willingness to put themselves through this. So, it's a sad state, very much sad.
Ricardo, if you didn't have
Wow.
anything, the other thing I was going to get into was the low-level offenses. Like this may move into immigration at least a little bit, but what about the impact on someone's status if they're on the path to citizenship, if that's what they're doing, and if there's low-level offenses? Can you talk about the impact that has, whether it's traffic violations, moving violations, things like that? Because that's where it feels very much like. I don't want to say, but I think a term that I've heard a lot is about respectability politics. And I know that came up during the public charge conversation. And there was a lot of comparisons to Donald Trump and members of his family and how many points, I guess, they would have scored along this spectrum of who ought to be here, as I've heard it put in a few different ways. But when it comes to just those smaller things, and I think in state court at state court level or superior court levels, what happens to someone's status if something comes up, if they're accused of a crime or an infraction?
It depends on what status they're in. So, for example, if somebody's here that's undocumented, meaning without any status in the United States, and they get pulled over for, just something as small as no driver's license, that can start the whole process of removal from the United States, even if they've been here for 25 years and have kids and all kinds of things. So something as simple as a no license charge can lead you into this, long protracted litigation. I have cases hanging around from 2012 that have been kicked around through so many judges and changes, where it all started with a no driver's license charge. And we're arguing and litigating over whether they get to stay. And, 8 years
That sounds
later,
very expensive.
It is expensive and it's emotionally taxing. It's a lot, and not everyone can afford to fight, so they just end up leaving.
It just feels like the ROI is not there, even if you're the most hard-lined nationals. I don't understand the economic. I don't understand even the ROI for you, even if you, regardless of where you stand on this. It just feels like such a drain on what resources we could be using. And I don't understand what their argument is for that process, because the legal system is not an inexpensive system. So how is that justified, or what have you heard or come up against?
Well, so under the Obama administration, where people were low priorities for removal, if you could show that you had ties to the United States that were extensive, that you were, not a criminal, that you paid your taxes, that you earned income, if you were a low priority, they would go ahead and administratively close your removal case. They would basically say, we're not going to try or waste resources on this. It's a waste of our time. Under Trump, that we have a zero tolerance policy. So even those that are low priority for removal, they are attempting to remove each and every person regardless of whether or not they have, a long history here, kids, it is zero tolerance. So any sort of work we were doing with the government to try to, assist with the backlogs by taking people out of removal proceedings and only focusing resources on those that were priorities in the sense that they were criminals, they deserve, they needed to be out of here. But instead we're focusing, on my clients that are restaurant owners and farm owners and factory owners. We're focusing on their workers who are really busting their tails to provide Americans with much needed services, food, all kinds of things. I mean, my clients can't function without their immigrant workers, and the crackdown under Trump has greatly debilitated their ability to do business, because the argument that, that these jobs are being, taken away from American workers is simply not true. There are no American workers who want to do a lot of these jobs. And, in my opinion, a dishwasher for a local, well-known Atlanta restaurant, or a sous chef or whatever, who may not be documented and, bust their tail working 60-hour weeks in difficult, conditions. That was somebody who under Obama would not be forced to be removed. They would do what's called administrative closure. That same person under Trump gets a, no license charge. They are going to fight till the end to get that person out of the country. So some of my clients will pay for the legal defense of their workers. Some simply can't afford it. But those, hardworking people for my business owning clients are often targeted right now for removal, even though they're not criminals. They're working hard. They're doing jobs Americans won't do.
So let me ask Elizabeth a question. So we're seeing now that they're trying to pass this kind of legislation that says for college students, if you're not on campus classes and you're only going to be online, they want to send them back to where they came from. Are we going to see a parallel between that ideology and if you are a legal immigrant working for a company and you get furloughed, that because you're furloughed, you go back to your country? Is that something that we may actually end up seeing if this war on immigration is so vigilant in its efforts?
Well, that policy, I mean, when I saw that policy come out, I lost it. Because that is just, I mean, it's a public safety issue, and that we understand the definition of a student. You've got to be in-person classes. There's some requirements. We are in a pandemic. It's, Harvard, MIT, everyone's going virtual for the safety of our nation. And to penalize these students who may be medical doctors, students, PhD, like engineers, the STEM professions that we really need, was just outrageous. So Harvard, MIT did sue, and then the government just backed down. They got to like some, in court, they rolled back that policy, that attempt to deport these students if they were going to be online. I mean, because it was causing, a lot of chaos. People would scramble to change programs and things like that. So when it comes to furloughs, it depends on your status. And there's various, if you're on an H-1B visa, which is the professional worker visa, you have a wage requirement. So if you are furloughed, then you're out. You cannot furlough those H-1B workers. You will have to be let go. And there is a 60-day grace period. So I think some employers use that 60 days to take them off and then put them back on, March, April, May. If they're another status, it would just really depend. When that wage requirement comes into the picture, there just can't be furloughs. And so a lot of these people that are non-immigrants, they're here temporarily working, multinational managers, they're essential workers or specialized workers for investors, investor visa, investor treaty trader companies. If they're laid off, there may not be an option for them they would have to find another employer. If someone's on H-1B, they may be able to transfer to another company and still keep their H-1B. But there's a lot of complicated issues that all of that brings into play. Fortunately, like my companies, my clients, I didn't see a ton of that. One of my engineering companies that does a lot for the airport city of Atlanta, their like business is booming. They had some optional practical training students that are getting H-1Bs. They've actually gotten an H-1B number in the lottery. We filed their petitions, but they're in this kind of training period. So they were able to maybe, turn back their hours and do some things, but that now I think they're back on. And then I have another company that has a lot of IT. We just kept those H-1B people working. There wasn't the like rush to furlough and rush to So I didn't see a lot of that. And I think the good thing about the administration, the PPP loan helped a lot of, although there was controversy there, that did help a lot of employers keep their workforce, which was good. But before the pandemic happened, and before March, our economy was booming. I mean, there was, people were, there were not enough visas for the, there's an annual quota for H-1Bs. There's definitely not enough. By, 60% wanted visas for this annual, 60% were rejected that applied in the lottery this year. So business is still booming. The economy is booming. I don't know, where are we going to end up at the end? And then the other question is, when the pandemic, we're going to end up with a different kind of world. People are going to be working a lot of different ways. Maybe they don't need to bring someone as a non-immigrant because they can be virtual and Zoom somewhere else. So there may be a lot of changes. I literally, I completely think that's going to happen. The only constant is change. So we just have to be ready for that. And I've even, like, in my own law practice, I haven't seen my two attorneys in person. I haven't seen them since March. So we're going to be, we've been doing the virtual thing somewhat, like our clients are all over the world for a long time. And now it's like, okay, this is okay. We'll make it. We'll make it through. But, and our practice has also been affected because all the consulates are closed abroad. A lot of things are happening, but we're just kind of turning, like, where can we go do work, and what can we do for clients, and not just firing everyone or like letting everyone go and just giving up. So hopefully, I believe in America. I believe in the spirit of our nation, and these immigrants, they provide such a great service. I mean, if you go down to and it's interesting because now all of the school is going to be virtual. Like a lot of cities, I think some of the private schools in Atlanta will be going back in person, but I think they announced many of the counties and city of Atlanta, it's going to be Atlanta Public Schools virtual. So, but they barred the au pairs from coming in. So that was the last proclamation. So if you're going to have to either be working from home or going back to your job, but there's virtual school, and then you've arranged to have your au pair come, obviously you want to have that experience and you need that person, and maybe you prefer to not have someone from the US or whatever it may be. People are going to be scrambling for childcare. You had arranged your childcare and now you're screwed. So it's not effective. It's not like, okay, well, I guess maybe by default you're going to go find an American worker, but that might not be your, you wanted to live in person, and now you're going to have to, deal with this other issue. So that's
in there for you, Elizabeth, and this may, well, for both of you actually, going back to students, because I think we had a guest talk a little bit about, I think it was HB 896 in this past session, and it was a bill that I know a lot of folks were really hopeful for, and I have friends at Forward US who really wanted to see Georgians who were not citizens get access to in-state tuition, because I think Georgia is one of a handful of states in which that's just not the case. And I know there are states that do allow in-state tuition, and I think whether they allow it flat out or they require, proof of intent to become a citizen may be a different question. But when you mentioned kind of what program a student is in, it feels like such a crazy qualification. And I hear a lot of talk about students needing to have the best grades as possible and show volunteer experience and all this sort of thing. And when I think about so many other folks who are citizens and went to college, when I was at Emory, I was one of very few folks who were on a scholarship. But I mean, there are people who kids who just sleep until 1 p.m. and take 4 credits a semester and completely goof off. And it feels like such a crazy thing that Georgia spends so much money trying to fund the cost of education, and has such a big push about keeping Georgians here, but won't allow in-state tuition to Georgians who are here, who may not be legal citizens, but who want to go to college and go to a Georgia public college, rather than a private institution. I I don't know if you can speak to those rationales there, but could you talk about to what extent you understand the benefits of in-state tuition being for students, or if you have familiarity with either this past bill or some of the arguments against it, and where does that kind of friction or tension come from? Because it usually around kids and around education, I feel like there's a lot less partisan friction. That's usually an agreed upon goal, is that all kids are educated and all kids are educated locally.
Well, I feel like it's all a political issue. We are so, and Amna, you speak to this in just one second, but we've been so divided politically on this issue of immigration, and it's not even, it shouldn't even be a political issue. I mean, sometimes it's an economic issue, but, you know, if you're a Republican, you know, you've got to have that hard line, you know, you've got to have that hard line. You can't give in. And I don't even know why I feel like our solution might be, this is what I was thinking, and this has been the talk, but our solution might be a moderate Republican leader who can bring the two parties together and not divide us, you know, or maybe a Democrat leader that's more on the conservative side. I don't know, we need to bridge that gap, but it doesn't make any sense. Let's just dig in our heels harder. Like each side, we're so divided as a country because no one's coming together. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, but I'm a Republican. I'm not going to get reelected unless I vote this way, or vice versa. And I think that's kind of what's run. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. If you look at an immigrant student in the face and you tell them that, you know, you may have gotten every scholarship or every award and you're valedictorian, but you still can't get, you know, your in-state tuition. You've got to pay this out-of-state tuition, or hopefully you get into a private college and get a scholarship. But yeah, it's very hard. I mean, on these kids, so the DACA kids, which is probably a lot of the population you're talking about, they, you know, a lot of them came as infants, toddlers to the US. They know no other country. They have to kind of navigate a world where they're basically feel not wanted by their own country, the only country they really know. I don't know if you remember when you're 3 or 4 years old, but you don't know that country. So they have that anxiety, but many of them are achieving great things, doing amazing things in spite of that. And still, the Supreme Court ruled to keep DACA in place, and this administration posted some crazy stuff on their website and has refused to acknowledge DACA, the Supreme Court decision, and has called the DACA kids illegal aliens that are taking US jobs. So that's the agency that we have to go to for benefits, but they're posting, you know, a response where they don't even recognize the supreme law of the land. Amna, what do you think?
I mean, honestly, I think to reference the statement made by USCIS, which is the agency that we both apply to for benefits. The acronym is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. That's the name of the agency, services. And when the Supreme Court announced that they were going to reinstate DACA, what is an administrative agency much like the DMV, which simply processes applications, they came out with this scathing, political, vitriolic statement, basically condemning the Supreme Court. That would be like the DMV condemning a Supreme Court decision, basically stating it's not the law. And, you know, as practitioners, we're like, the Supreme Court is the law. So
Yeah,
for the USCIS to say to the Supreme Court that this is not lawful and these are illegal aliens stealing US jobs, it was, I think every single legal practitioner who works in this field, it was something that we've never seen.
Insane. I mean, that's the agency that's supposed to be impartial and to adjudicate benefits based on the regulations, and they're not impartial. I mean, and they want us to like file an appeal of a denial of the case. I'm dealing right now with some denials because I mean, the denials are going up like just crazy. Let's just deny this for some ridiculous reason. And then now we're filing in federal court. And then, you know, then the AUSA might go, the U.S. attorney will go back to the agency and say, what can you do about this case? I don't want to have to go through litigating it. Then we get a new notice of intent to deny with all the same reasons. And no, I want the judge to see this case.
Yeah, it's obstruction.
But why am I having to go to the district court when if they followed the law and we're like, it's like this, and this, you know, it's like this, I guess, you know, they're looking for any way to deny. Now they're like looking back at like old visa applications. Like if you didn't list your some employment on a visitor or visa or student visa application, then you've made a material misrepresentation. You didn't, because on this form you didn't include that. It's crazy. So yeah, I mean, we're just in an interesting place, and everybody's very divided. But we're, you know, the agency where I once felt like this is like kumbaya. I literally thought that in my head. We're gonna hold hands and just sing together is now no longer. Yeah, and every day it gets worse. Every day it gets worse. And we don't want to be, you know, we don't want to be like that. We understand, like, I don't know, like these things happen with the students and I literally the other day was like, and I'm not going to give up on America, but I was like, okay, I can move to like the Azores in Portugal. I can do this thing remotely. You know, I can figure something else out because do I want to live in this country?
A lot of folks have had that thought, for sure. For sure. Now, were you going to say something about that process or what you've noticed?
No, I was just going to say that this just reiterates, you know, that this whole notion that the Trump administration and its supporters are fine with immigration as long as it's legal. I think that the policies that are coming down from this administration only underscore that that is in fact not true. They are obstructing in the hopes that people simply give up. And like Elizabeth, you know, I've thought about it too. You know, maybe my husband's German. Maybe we could move to Germany and I could work as an ALA lawyer, which is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, you know, working with the U.S. consulate to bring workers or whatever to the United States. And my husband made a very salient point. He said, look, if things get bad enough that we want to move to Germany, who is going to want to come to the United States?
Or better yet, what are we going to do? Who can't leave? And if you all leave, so please don't.
Yeah, we're kind of grounded and in a sinking ship at this point. I mean,
yeah.
What does that mean for us? Like,
well, we have
that sucks.
Listen, you just have to keep positive. As I said, the only constant is change. Things are going to turn around. It's the ebb and the flow of life. And, you know, our country's amazing. Our people are amazing. When all of this boils up, all of these things that are happening right now, big change is coming. So I'm just going to think about that in a positive way. And I want a better country for my children. I mean, I don't want to think about it any other way. Sometimes we focus on the negative. It just, you know, we can get so down that hole. And I have a couple people that just email me they're really nasty. They email me because I'm a little vocal about immigration and I send out some newsletters and videos and of course, and these, you know, I'll get an occasional email that I'm, you know, why are you supporting these immigrants that are stealing U.S. jobs? And it's just such a, like, coming from such a scarcity mentality. I just can't even, I'm not even like on the same level as this person, and I just feel sorry for them. And so there's a lot of people out there that blame everyone else for their problem. And, you know, I mean, we need to take responsibility for ourselves, responsibility for our country. We all have a part in this. So
let me ask this, because what you just said kind of goes to my point. So in a perfect Trump world, what does it look like if we don't have immigrants in, let's say, in employment law? Like, what does it look like if we stop letting immigrants come in and get employment? What would that look like? Because I don't think any of us really grapple how much immigrants do as it pertains to industry in the United States. What would that look like in
That
employment?
just scared the hell
like
out of me, you saying a perfect Trump world. Let's not use that technology. Like,
I'm just saying, I'm kind of past the mindset. So I'm like, I don't think we really, it's like when we were having a trade war, and, you know, somebody finally was like, okay, look, if we stop trading with China, that Apple Watch you love, the pieces that go in it, we're not going to have. Medication that we're accustomed to having, we're no longer, when people finally broke it down like that, everybody was like, whoa, I didn't realize that's the kind of stuff that we're importing into this country. So I think people's perspectives kind of changed. So I'm kind of want to apply that same ideology in this situation. If we say we no longer want immigrants in an employment arena, what would that look like? Like, are there jobs that we just don't do that they do? Are there positions that they are qualified that we're not qualified for? What does that look like in a Trump world? And I'll say specifically in employment, because you work with these companies, you know the positions they're bringing in. What would that look like if we say no more immigrants are doing employment in the United States?
So one good example that I deal with every day is we have a shortage of physicians in our country. That's going to last for the next 20 years. Less people are going to medical school. My dad's a doctor. My brother and I, we didn't go to medical school because medicine's not the same as it used to be. Salaries are not as good. Healthcare has changed a lot. There's just not enough, medical schools cranking out enough doctors, honestly. So there's a lot people living longer. We need more. There's also, we have a lot of rural areas that are underserved, rural and urban, that may be underserved, that the physicians that are going to medical school don't want to be in those positions because it's tough work. So we have programs to bring in foreign educated physicians. They are trained here. They come in and do their residency training, their fellowships, all in the United States. They're licensed here. These are the people that I bring in. And I have several big hospitals. I have one very big hospital system in Georgia. That's my client. I have another one in Iowa. These foreign physicians really, they are like saving U.S. citizen lives every day. I mean, they're serving in the underserved areas. They're doing a job that maybe a U.S. worker, wouldn't want to do. And this is going to be ongoing. If we took that away, I don't know what we would do. I was just in Lubbock, Texas, which is a little bit, I have a rural type area. It's a city. So my dad's been in the hospital, but every physician that I talked to, like I'd say 50% were foreign nationals. I mean, I know they probably went through that same process and they're there, in the ICU and they're specialists. And so that's one example. But it's also any other medical type profession. We also have shortages as well.
But I think you follow this through its logical conclusion to sort of talk about what you were saying. If we were to achieve Trump's perfect world without immigrants in it, we would have a lot of supply chain disruptions. We wouldn't have access to food that we eat. So many of our farms rely on migrant farm workers. So that's on the opposite end of things. So while we have the STEM workers and the physicians and the teachers and the scientists and the IT workers on one end, which we badly need because STEM workers in this country we just simply don't have enough of them. But on the opposite end of the fiscal spectrum is the migrant farm labor, the migrant factory worker working in meat processing plants, working that strawberry farm. Think about all of our agricultural output is primarily put out by migrants. And if we were to get rid of all of them, I can tell you that we will not have workers to replace them. So it would go down to not having adequate medical care and frankly not even having adequate supply chains to the food that we eat daily. There would be shortages. So if we were to follow your statement to its conclusion, which is what would our country look like without immigrants, I mean, it would be a mess. I mean, more of a mess than we're in right now. I mean, we wouldn't even have access to basic things. So the war against immigrants is actually a war against America.
I mean, it's the economy that drives. If the economy would be, if we didn't have a job available and an employer willing to hire someone, and not only willing to hire them, but willing to pay all these fees. So for an H-1B, it's $1,500 for the U.S. worker training fee. So every single H-1B and an extension. So you get $3,000 for 6 years of H-1B. There's a fraud prevention fee that's $500, and then the cost of the attorney and the cost of the filing fee, which is $460. So every H-1B worker, you might be spending like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Why would an employer do that if they didn't need that worker? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're not like, oh, he's my friend, no, these big companies do not function like that. So
they need the. All right, so we're at time. So my last question is for Amna. Does the court system look as bad as it did last year, or does it look worse as it pertains to kids, DACA kids, things of that magnitude? Is there any hope on the horizon for that getting any better for these kids?
So your question is twofold. Does the immigration court look better than last year in general? I would say it was bad last year, but it's worse this year combined with coronavirus. On some level, it's been made worse, but on some level, coronavirus has made things better in that they've increased technology to allow attorneys to work remotely. They've created email addresses and e-filing, which most courts have had for years, but immigration courts did not. So it fast-tracked technology, which allows us to be more efficient and not necessarily have to come to court for every single nitpicky thing. So in that respect, our clients are saving money, attorneys are saving time. But as far as the DACA kids, if they're placed in removal proceedings, the judges go ahead and order them deported, but DACA prevents them from exercising that order of removal. So under Obama, if you went to immigration court with a DACA kid, they would go ahead and administratively close that case and kick it back out of court. But under Trump, if you're a DACA kid and happen to land in immigration court, they will order you removed because DACA is not a defense to removal. It simply means that they will not exercise your order of removal. So if DACA gets taken away, any of those kids with removal orders will be sent back to their countries, even if they haven't been there since they were 2 years old. So that's the
Wow,
standard on them right now.
That's crazy. All right, so Elizabeth, tell everybody how to get in touch with you. Any other pertinent news you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
Our website's goimmigrationlaw.com. My direct line's 404-220-7615. Email's egarvish@goimmigrationlaw.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Garvish Immigration Law Group. Amna and I also have another group that we started during the pandemic that's called Legals, Women Legal Entrepreneurs. And we're doing, every month we're doing a Facebook Live, a video. We have a special guest, and we're trying to, provide information to our community. And you can go over and like that page on Facebook, Legals. It's been great being with you guys. And anybody, just please reach out to me if you have any questions about immigration. You can, even message me on Facebook, email me, whatever it may be. I put a video on the other day, and I was like, just because I was so mad about that student policy that came out, and I just posted on my page. I said, if you need to know about immigration, just call me and I'll sit down and explain it to you, because a lot of people just don't know, and it's not important to them because it's not their everyday thing, but it is important to our country and important to our nation.
The same thing.
Yeah, I don't have as easy a website name as Elizabeth, but my website is Shirazi Law, SHIRAZI Law. My phone number is 404-523-3611, and you can follow me on all social media under Shirazi Law. So that would be Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we also have a YouTube channel, and it's all under Shirazi Law.
All right, Simone, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Not at all. I just appreciate both of you ladies for coming and for bringing your passion about this, not just about this issue, but about an entire group of people, essentially the population of the United States, and kind of helping to highlight exactly what's changed. And for all of us who don't understand how it works, I've been a longtime advocate of transparency with regard to the legal system, period, all aspects of it, civil and criminal, and especially when it comes to immigration law. I feel like there's just a lot that a lot of people don't know and cannot follow along with, and kind of lean and rely on groups like the National Immigration Center or Justice Center and the ACLU to kind of highlight these big issues. And I appreciate, Ricardo, you calling out that, you know, without family separation and without some of the images and some of the headlines, I do think a lot of other Americans would be completely oblivious. And so, but I like hearing from practitioners, and I appreciate you both bringing some of the testimonies that you brought as well and talking about how significant this is. And to the political piece, I would just say me and Ricardo are kind of both on the same page in the sense that we don't believe that the party system is helpful at all. I would love to see it completely abolished. I don't think that there'd be a leader, Republican or Democrat, that could help save any of this. You've said it before. Now, not abolished, but you said you believe the two-party system is healthy. And Elizabeth made that point as well. I would love to see these issues be talked about with regard to people and economics and not party. That'd be my last comment.
I want to thank you ladies for showing up. Me and Elizabeth had like a 2-hour conversation before the show actually happened. So she has to have her own show with me, like where she just goes for broke. So that's just what she.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of this, like personal development and the personal growth and all these things. I have to talk to you about something after we get off the podcast. But I love that stuff. Like that is my passion right now.
I know. And to Amna, which I hope I got it right this time because I was saying the wrong thing. Thank you, my dear, for being here, because I think we just don't realize, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff until y'all talked about today, that a lot of the rights that we have as it pertains to court proceedings and speedy trials, I didn't realize a lot of that stuff does not play in immigration court. So I learned a lot today, because I thought, they had those same rights, and, I was like, okay, well, maybe they're just suspending rights, whatever the case may be, and to discover that it's not in place, which prolongs their processes, is just mind-blowing to me. And even you two's final thoughts of what this Trump world would look like, I don't think we understand those things, that physicians and the, cherry pickers and things that we don't think about when we go to the grocery store or when we go to the doctor, that all that is affected by immigration, which is really my goal today, to bring that to the forefront, that this is what it will look like if we let this war on immigration, if we let them win. So I appreciate both of you ladies for coming in and bringing this amazing perspective. On Monday, we will have Linda Chapman, who is, she works with grant writing and things of that magnitude as it pertains to media. So if you have a documentary that you feel like will change the world, she's going to help you find a grant that will probably fund that project and make it get to where it wants to go. So we're going to be dispelling myths about grant writing, grant writers, all that good stuff. Linda's an expert in her field. So that is on Monday at 12 o'clock. Again, thank you to all my ladies, including Simone. And we will see you on Monday, same time, same place, on the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Wright.